Globally, 2/3 of all agricultural land are not usable to grow crops.
There is no such thing as a leather farm.
Leather is a byproduct of the meat industry, and unfortunately we have many challenges in this world. That is one of them. People need to eat.
I think there's definitely a disconnect between people and their food source. I think it's really important that people learn more about agriculture and where their food comes from.
We have a great opportunity in our hands right now. The future is not defined.
We have to produce a lot of food in very efficient ways in order to feed all of those people. And frankly, we've been doing it very well. If you look in the last couple decades, we've pulled millions of people globally out of poverty, and we've been able to feed them like humans never have in history.
There are many different reasons as to why we use livestock, right? And people most often think of meat, but meat, in the case of cattle, for example, is just one of 400 products.
I've heard people say that some feel that the sole purpose for that animal to be slaughtered is for their hide, which could not be any further from the truth. I mean, the reason that we raise livestock, whether it's beef cattle, pigs, sheep, we raise those cattle, the rancher, the farmer, the feeder, the processor, that is done primarily for meat consumption.
I think that if you're an owner of a restaurant, or if you're a consumer in general, I think that you have, to a certain extent, an obligation to sustainability. I say that as a parent. I say that as a business owner. Sustainability comes into play when we talk about what our future looks like. And so if we're not worrying about it now, then we won't have it in the future.
Yeah, so we are 45 minutes north of San Francisco. We're about 30 minutes east from the Point Reyes National Seashore. So I'm Melissa Daniels, and I have been ranching my entire life. I've been raising cattle since I could walk. It's really not a great place to grow crops here. It's just way too windy, it's way too steep.
It's worth understanding that around the world, different regions, different landscapes, different land is not capable of delivering the same outputs. So we have grasslands, we have wetlands, we have deserts, we have really good grazing land, and we have really good arable land. But you can't produce crops on all land around the world.
Not just in California, not just in the UK, but globally, 2/3 of all agricultural land are not usable to grow crops. They are what's called marginal lands, and the only land use for those marginal lands is through ruminant livestock such as cattle.
Cattle, sheep, they are built, their stomachs are built to digest plant material that we as humans cannot consume. A lot of times that plant material is in locations that we as humans cannot get to. The beauty of these animals is that they can utilize those marginal lands, they can utilize the areas that we cannot crop.
Here, in this area on the Somerset levels, the reason why we have to have livestock farms is because the ground is not suitable for growing crops. Far too wet for arable land, so it is livestock and cattle are really your only option.
When we grow crops, we're taking nutrients out of the soil, and we do have to replace those nutrients to keep it sustainable for the future. What livestock grazing can do is enhance that soil health.
This area right here, as you can see, the grass is nice and green. The cattle eat the grass here, and then they produce manure, and the manure fertilizes the soil, puts carbon back in the soil, and it brings back healthy growth.
If you're only looking at one part of the cycle, you can understandably think that cattle are part of the problem. Cattle emit methane. Methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. It does contribute to warming. But if you don't understand the rest of that cycle and that rest of that system, then you're not really taking into account the full context of what is a natural cycle and a natural system.
Using livestock is not a waste of a resource, it is making the best use of our limited resources. And that's what we've got to do in times of a global, growing human population with limited natural resources.
There's no such thing as replacing leather. Leather at its heart is a recycling industry, and that's because there are not many uses for a cattle hide, especially outside of leather production purposes. A hide at best is worth about 3 to 5% of the value of the animal. At worst, it's worth nothing, and it goes into a landfill.
Our goal is to limit what goes to the landfill. We're here to take care of our environment and to be stewards of the land and take care of our animals and try to utilize as much as we can.
Well, fast fashion is, I think it's negative. Simply put, is incredibly negative because we are incentivizing an increase in consumption of a finite resource planet.
So slow fashion, from my understanding, is shopping less and having more key pieces that will last you longer. So rather than spending £400 a month on loads of fast fashion items that you're not going to want in a year, they fall apart, and spending that £400 on a key piece that you're going to have for the next 10 years.
By over-consuming any one thing, food, fashion items, you are going to have a negative impact on your ecosystem and on the planet. So you need to look at the level of consumption and understand that sometimes less consumption is better, but better consumption is better.
I went to a school in Paris, and after 2 years I was hired by Hermes and started working for them and did that for 14 years. 30 years ago, everything shifted from handmade to mass production, but I think things are starting to revert back to a more traditional craft and appreciation for unique pieces. So for me, luxury can be everyday use. If you buy a product that has been well made, well created, you will have it, you could use it for every day for 20 years, and it will last. So that's for me the true essence of luxury, is a piece that was created to last.
Leather is seen as a premium product, and quite rightly so. It has premium properties, so we mustn't forget that. But actually, it should be more everyday. It should be more high street. And we often think about price point, and you can't match the cost of a plastic pair of shoes, for example. However, if your plastic pair of shoes are wearing out, and so you're buying 2 or 3 pairs of plastic shoes to the 1 pair of leather shoes that you would buy, then you have to think about the economies of scale there, and you're still going to spend just as much money on the inferior product as you are on the leather product.
You'll buy a leather jacket and it doesn't change style, it doesn't go out of fashion.
You know, it could be a bag, a leather bag, or like a rucksack, and you know, your outfit is almost straight away elevated to like, you know, a really nice outfit just from that one piece.
If you're going to be spending your hard-earned money on an item, you want it to be the real thing, you want it to be long-lasting, durable, and you want it to be sexy. I mean, that could easily be on a Coach runway. That's fantastic. I mean, look at the style, the design.
At the moment, my focus is vintage and historical clothing. A lot of the materials I see in my archival work, the things that survive are the products that were meant to last. The leather and the old shoes and everything, that's all still, you could wear it out and it wouldn't fall apart.
In the cover shots, I try to use a leather jacket if there is one, because it's always the most beautiful shot, yeah. You know, the way it creases, you know, the way, you know, you can choreograph a model, I guess, to pose, and it has this robust kind of structure to it, and you can form a lot of beautiful shapes and photos with leather.
Consumers have unfortunately started to lose their connection to natural materials like leather, and don't really understand what it is that they're purchasing or using in their everyday goods.
Vegan leather, well, that's plastic. It's fossil fuel based material. Real leather is real leather, comes from animals. Now, I think there's a natural bias from certain demographics in the consumer base to pick and choose the data they want to look for in a material.
Leather alternatives have a place, and so brands, retailers, OEMs, they have a duty to provide for society that have those lifestyle choices.
We need to look at the data. Our approach to this matter is always science-based, data-driven.
There are a number of indices out there that purport to measure the impact, the environmental impact or the impact on the environment of various materials used in fashion and footwear. One of them is the Higg Index. The problem is the way the playing field has been set with these scoring systems, they're very much bent against natural materials. For example, leather, cotton, wool, all of our natural materials we've been utilizing for thousands of years seem to then become the worst option that could possibly out there for a brand to utilize. You're just looking at a scorecard and you're going to say, okay, I think I'm going to go with the plastic material here because this tool is telling me this is the most important one to use.
So I think the conversation with sustainability is definitely there and people are talking about it, but there's also a lot of greenwashing that happens, especially from bigger brands that sort of claim that they're being sustainable when they're not.
It's not that we as humans say, oh, what's the most efficient use of resources and now let's all eat that. But we make our food buying decisions based on many different criteria. One of the leading one is, what do we like to eat?
Beef consumption here in the US went from kind of a record high in the 70s. We were consuming on average, every man, woman, and child in the United States was consuming roughly 90 pounds of beef. It's diminished over time through the 70s into the 80s. Currently, average per capita consumption is roughly 65 pounds.
The driver of cattle harvesting is for beef, and cattle ranching is for beef. So the trend seems not to be changing anytime soon in the next 5-10 years, as it hasn't in the last 40-50 years.
Here in America, it is beef-centric. Like I said, we do live in that cheeseburger world, or the cheeseburger paradise, if you will. My name is Michael Friedman. I am the chef and owner of the Red Hen here in Washington, D.C. The Red Hen opened up 10 years ago, and the goal was to provide a great neighborhood restaurant with great food, great ambiance, great hospitality, and kind of approachable cuisine that we've rooted in Italian tradition. Our meat comes from a mixture of local and kind of domestic. We really look toward making sure that we buy really great sourced meats that are raised humanely, that are raised on a grass-fed diet, that have open air to breathe and walk, and that are treated well. We do think that when you have that kind of product, it tastes better, it feels better serving, and there's a story behind it.
There's definitely been a shift in understanding procurement and much more engagement with where the food comes from and the wine comes from and everything like that. And also I think there has been an interesting shift in the way people eat.
There's a double-edged sword to going to farmers markets, right? They're incredibly sustainable for the local market, but they are expensive. And not everybody can afford to go every Sunday to the farmers market and buy chicken or beef or pork at $18, $22, $24 a pound. People know food in this country to be cheap, and they have a problem with paying more for quality.
The consumer has, I liken him to the Tyrannosaurus Rex, right? That great big dinosaur. Got a great big mouth. They love to tell you everything that they want. But when it comes to paying for the product, they got this little bit hand that can't quite reach into their wallet to grab it. So, I think we need to be mindful that as we go down these paths of sustainability and trying to one-up one another in terms of Well, my cattle never left the ranch. They've grown here. I bring a mobile slaughter unit out, and that meat then stays in my possession, and I market it at a farmer's market. That is a very inefficient means of producing beef.
We have to find a way to feed 9 billion people and still preserve the planet. That's the reality. And one of the alternatives is to, probably the only alternatives, to increase productivity, produce more using less.
We chose a leather bar, an orange stained leather bar for the Red Hen. I feel like leather was always part of kind of the American landscape, and certainly for me growing up in New York and around New York as a child, and my father was from the Bronx, I mean, he wore a leather jacket.
One of the most important things for us in opening Lighthouse was being a part of a healthy food system. I mean, if we stopped serving meat tomorrow and everyone stopped eating meat tomorrow, it would not solve the problem. And we'll have an industry that would lose a lot of employees. We will have all these sub-industries that would also collapse. Lots of animals eat really nice grains. And so we're looking at this this domino impact that I don't think people that are attacking the meat industry really understand that can follow. And so again, the better solution is just sourcing good products, local products that travel very little, that have a lot of transparency behind them, where you can see what the impact is. And constantly making it better, right? Rather than eradicating something, let's look at how we can make something more environmentally friendly.
I think that people need to think about how much beef we eat in America, and then think about the skin of every cattle. And if you're a smart farmer, or if you're a smart business owner, you're going to try to utilize every part of your product. And that is a byproduct of eating meat.
We have a responsibility as consumers and as a society to be utilizing every available resource to us in an efficient way, in a smart way, in a way that is going to allow it to be sustained into the future.
It's really interesting that as a society we've lost the ability to understand where we get our products from.
In my opinion, the future lies in making the best use of limited resources. What my role is as a scientist is to find ways to minimize unwanted aspects that we find happening in animal agriculture and turn them into maybe an asset. So here at the University of California in Davis, we're doing research to further minimize the environmental footprint of livestock. In these very buildings that you see over here, we study how we can reduce, let's say, belching from cattle or their manure emissions, how we can turn something that was so far seen as a liability into an asset. And that is absolutely possible. It's called a digester. The biogas is now trapped and then converted into a fuel type for vehicles. We can reduce unwanted emissions from the livestock sector by 30, 40, 50% within the next 5 years. And we will, and we must.
We as an industry have been moving all of our processes towards the right way, the ethical way, the responsible way of tanning these hides and skins into leather so that we have less impact on the environment.
Consumers need to know more, or to know what the industry knows about leather, what the real meaning of leather, and where so a choice can be made.
So I think brands have a real responsibility now to make sure that anything that they're saying is demonstrable and verifiable. And we have to move away from greenwashing because it's really harming our industry.
Our goal with this project is that all leather is sustainable, and the consumers shouldn't have to choose between sustainable or ethical or not.
Sustainability is the only conversation in fashion right now. If you're not thinking about sustainability, then unfortunately you're not relevant. How do we look at the industry in a responsible way? It's to reuse and repurpose. Heritage brands have made their money on an older generation that now have children and grandchildren of their own. So at some point they have to start to think about the changing attitudes within the demographic that they're going for.
I feel like Schott is known for their American-made quality. We've been around since 1913, so the main goal has been to always make sure that anything that we do is purposeful and with intention. I think leather is a fabric that people consider because you can't just throw them away. It's always reusable. You can always try to find a way to patch it up. You can always find a way to make it work. Even if it rips, it doesn't mean the leather itself is ruined. More people are now getting used to or even trying to buy vintage pieces because of how soft they become or just because of how they've aged. And so it's all about recycling and reusing consistently. This is one of the vintage pieces that we've had in our archives for a little bit. I believe Ralph Lauren wore it in a photo shoot. And so this is like something that has just like aged really well. They clearly customized it. They made it their own.
Couple of great examples of brands that I've worked a lot with in the past are their repair services. These are brands that have been around for a long time. They deal in quality and they give consumers the ability to send products back in for repair and refurbishment.
Hey, Kevin. So this is the beast. This is the one.
What do we need to get done?
Well, obviously the buttonhole, the tearing of the lining, and then just the pocket, you know. But the biggest thing about this, though, and this is the thing, this jacket has been through bloody hell. Okay, nowhere is the leather ripped. Nowhere is and it's cowhide, like it's heavy, like it's no light.
It's not a joke.
It's no joke, but literally like almost bulletproof.
We have a great opportunity in our hands right now. The future is not defined. There's an opportunity to make leather to enhance the importance as a material.
So what we have now is a huge amount of access. You might be able to go onto an app and take something straight from somebody's wardrobe that they have worn and loved in the past, before you were even born. So at the end of the day, if you're recycling and reusing, then you're not putting it into landfill, and that's really exciting.
My hope is there is not a single hide or skin that results from our food production system going into a landfill anywhere in the world.
Where should we buy leather is a good question. We should buy leather everywhere, anywhere, from retail, from Amazon Marketplace, from eBay, from anywhere.